All right, good morning. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming. This is a session on open access monographs, Think Small. And I have to remind everyone of the code of conduct for this meeting, which you can read on the screen or use the QR code to read on your device if you so choose. So, good morning. Since the advent of open access scholarship in the 1990s, various publishing and funding models called by evolving sets of descriptors, colors, precious metals, gemstones, have consumed most of the attention. Nearly all of these glittering metaphors have referred to journal publishing, but longer form scholarship has had its own movements, albeit less colorful and less numerous. Many initiatives in the monograph OA sphere have involved large presses, generous philanthropic support, wealthy institutions, or some combination of all of those. These programs could be characterized as higher cost, higher overhead, and larger scale. And examples include Toward an Open Monograph Ecosystem or TOME, Direct to Open, Sustainable History Monograph Pilot, and others. Their degrees of sustainability vary, with some explicitly acknowledging their limited lifespans and largely catalytic intentions. This morning we want to highlight some lower cost, lower overhead, and smaller scale examples of long-form open access support. We've taken some inspiration from the famous 1959 advertising campaign that Doyle Dane Bernbach developed for the Volkswagen Beetle, imploring readers to think small. This unorthodox campaign cleverly promoted a car that flew in the face of the prevailing automotive ethos. Think about huge tail fins and giant V8 engines, for example, of the late Eisenhower era. By imploring readers to look at cars in a new way, the ad's developers helped usher in a sea change in the U.S. automotive market. Within a decade, Volkswagen was the largest selling import in a growing segment of the market. Now, we're not making any market-changing claims here, and we are not placing any modes in opposition to one another. We see our efforts as complementary, and they do not preclude participation in other kinds of models. But we do, nevertheless, want to talk about how smaller scale and we hope sustainable efforts can still add value to the OA sphere and not simply jump on other people's bandwagons. What challenges and opportunities do these more modest approaches bring? And how do we, as Doyle Dane Bernbach did for Volkswagen in 1959, change the narrative by thinking small? So joining me this morning in this discussion are Michael McGandy, Director of the University of South Carolina Press, Corinne Guimont, Director of Virginia Tech Publishing and Press, and Tyler Walters, Dean of Libraries at Virginia Tech. I'm David Banish, Dean of Libraries at the University of South Carolina, and I'll begin briefly by talking about Open Carolina, a partnership between the library and the press at USC. So what is Open Carolina? Open Carolina is a library-press partnership that involves a transfer of funding from the library to the press, which is an administratively independent entity. It sprang from conversations between a new dean at the time, me, and a new press director at the time, Michael, about possible collaborations between the press and the library. Our discussions resulted in an agreement to offer subvention for the OA publication of USC press titles prospectively and other support to open up selected titles retrospectively. Currently, the library transfers $60,000 annually to the press, and we also support the publishing platform, which is currently Manifold. All other aspects of publication are handled by the press. Editorial decisions, contract negotiations, and the amount of subvention offered to any given author. An author may have additional funds to make their work open access from the start, or they may be totally uninterested in open access publication. An agreement to publish with USC Press is not contingent on open access, and these details are strictly handled between the press and its authors. We have a memorandum of understanding that outlines our roles individually and jointly, and is subject to review and renewal every 3 years. The relatively modest amount of subvention is intended to be sustainable and may even grow as the program itself develops. So what are the primary advantages of this from a library perspective? The first I want to talk about briefly is the desire to do something in collaboration that added a little bit of a different flavor to the OA mix. The USC libraries already support other monograph open access initiatives financially, but this one was a local project that permitted us to, as the old bumper stickers used to say, think globally and act locally. Some other appealing dimensions: the appeal of reducing barriers to access for publications in the press's traditional strengths, regional history, civil rights, African American history, from a press that may be cut from library approval plans and purchases in times of constricted and shrinking monograph budgets. This is a way to help ensure that readers can find these items and read them without regard to their institutional affiliation or ability to pay. And finally, another appeal is the possibilities of multimodal peer-reviewed scholarship going forward. How might we leverage this model to move into areas that incorporate a variety of media, still and moving images, text, sound recordings, and so forth, that complement more traditional narrative modes, but could still be subject to peer review and the trusted imprimatur of a scholarly press? We've only just begun to think about these possibilities, but we remain pretty excited about the prospect of digital publishing that takes full advantage of its distinction from print. And with that, I'll hand it over to Michael McGandy.
Should I? I don't know if I should trust you. Good to see everyone. David said a lot about the partnership and its details. The one thing I want to highlight here, allowing you to do some reading yourselves, but one thing I particularly want to highlight is the role of Manifold. They weren't our original platform, but they became our platform, which involves a further outlay on the library's part and also a fair amount of overhead, particularly in the transition period, moving from Scholar Commons, which is B-Press, over to Manifold. The Manifold partners, they're third party, but they're really engaged. They are a group of people who are listening to feedback, who are willing to adjust their platform. So it's not something that's just off the shelf. We found that we actually, needing something in some sense was off the shelf, we found that we have a real collaborative entity there at the University of Minnesota. So it's a plus. It's not built into the structure of our relationship, but it's an added benefit that we have them involved. This is how we look as of a couple months ago. It's a much better look than we had with Scholar Commons. It's very professional. Alas, with screens, right? You can't see everything in one screen. The library collections, as they're going to be rolling on, are below what you see here. So we're highlighted. At some point in time, I think we're going to need to talk about our visibility on that landing page because it is a joint. We're joint tenants, and we think at the press that it's very important to share that space. But as of right now, we are the ones who are putting up the content, so therefore we're most prominent. But I do expect there'll be some negotiation, some change. Then, of course, that has to work within the Manifold system, whether the pages allow for what we want, but we'll see. But this makes us the press, look exceedingly good. And, the partnership, this presentation, when I arrived, we had one book that was open access. It was done through the Sustainable Historic, I have to say it in public, SHUMP. I love saying SHUMP. It was through the SHUMP program, and we thought that was a daring, bold venture, and we didn't really even know what we were doing. In a very short amount of time, because of this partnership, we have become I think, digitally open access and now multimedia progressive publisher that bears no resemblance to the publisher that we were when I arrived. And one of the things that when I arrived I thought was really important is that this press, which has been very staid, have a little bit of a cool factor, a little bit of a wow factor. This has done a lot for us in that regard and makes us far more desirable to authors across the United States and even around the world. But I mean, we're really a domestic publisher. It's meant a lot to us, and that look again means a lot. As with David, the benefits and highlights here are articulated. I think that the one thing that I would particularly highlight is we've improved the quality of our submissions because of being open access. Because while maybe people think, University of South Carolina Press, obviously we're not Oxford, we're not Chicago. But they also know that if they're with us and they're going open access, they can be global. They are as liable to be the result of a keyword search in JSTOR, Muse, what have you, and then immediately someone can download their work in a way that they may have thought University of South Carolina Press wasn't top notch, and then also was a little bit sequestered. And this breaking down of barriers in terms of dissemination has done a lot for our appearance in the world. And so I highlight acquisitions work. I mean, just my colleagues in acquisitions are finding it easier to bring things in and secure deals. It has also resulted in a decent revenue stream. We have money coming in from the libraries, but in the last fiscal year, we had $40,000 that came in from other sources because people did want to be open access. This fiscal year with actually money basically promised or earmarked already, we're projecting $75K of money coming in that's independent of the $60K there. So we're tapping funds that are starting to help with the pervasive free rider problem, right? The matter that the work we're doing is not being supported by book buying and also not being supported directly by deans in different sorts of ways, but open access is unlocking funds that people were reluctant to provide before. There are some big questions still about whether or not we're going to be losing money on the back end. If backlist sales and income will erode over time because of open access, but that's only something that we can just keep on doing what we're doing and see what results. We're gathering data. It's going to be a while before we can even say anything intelligent about that. Challenges and possibilities. The big thing really is this allows us to, I think, focus on what University Press really does, right? University Presses bake books. Well, sure, but what we do is we provide the verification of the authority, the validity, the trustworthiness of the knowledge that's being shared. It doesn't matter if it's in a book, a journal article, is a wholly digital publication, or again, or if it's multimodal. So I'm talking about us being a media neutral publisher where people come with good ideas and we find where those good ideas are best represented and best disseminated. We have 3 now, quote unquote, born digital and exclusively digital, never to be a book projects. One is about the rhetoric of Martin Luther King in North Carolina. One is about an anti-Vietnam War cafe that was created, or it was founded in Columbia, South Carolina, and sort of the experience of that. And a third is going to be an archival database of the Library of Cormac McCarthy. So interesting things. Up there is like, do we monetize them? I don't know, right? And these are big, open, challenging, and interesting questions. And they point back in a certain respect, I think, to partnerships, right? I think a lot of the things that we can now do are going to be very challenging to monetize. We can lock these things and password protect them if we wanted to, but obviously we're not going to do that. So the question is, what are the other partnerships? What are the other possibilities? Not just in the institution, but outside of the institution. So it's where we're at. We've got 19 books. We're really thinking of Open Carolina as a forward-looking project. We brought in some backlists to populate the page. So like, hey, we got books. But we're really not looking to mine our backlist. We're looking to make this a future-oriented new scholarship site. I'm sure there'll be some occasions to bring some other backlist titles in, but we have 19. And the growth is going to be with the front list. And right now, I'm really seeing our list as being a third. Trade books exclusively being, not being open access. A third of our monographs, more or less, though there's some wiggle room in there, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. Can we have trade books that are open access? Them being scholarly monographs for open access. And then another third of our scholarly monographs not being. And I for myself, regarding the press, I think it's really valuable to maintain that diversity of presentation and pricing. If you go all in on open access, I'd really worry because you've traded one monoculture for another monoculture. I think it's really important to keep a diversity of revenue streams. So the sustainability is almost built into the sort of ideology I have about the press, is that I don't want the press to be full-blown open access. And I'm going to say this in public, David, and I'm going to rue it that I said it, is that I don't know that we want more money right now. Because that would force us potentially to expand open access beyond our capacity.
All right, you heard it here.
I did.
As dean, I never refuse money. Never.
Being honest.
Yeah. All right, we're going to talk a bit about Virginia Tech Publishing and Press, but my role here is to give you a very quick history lesson and context for Virginia Tech Publishing and Press and kind of how we got here. So I do have 2 history degrees, so I'm qualified to do this, and I've been hanging around Virginia Tech for a little while now. So again, quick history lesson. The first item is the library has been publishing for quite a long time. Virginia Tech has not had a university press until very recently, but we have been publishing. In fact, we started with an e-journal back in 1989, the Journal of Technology Education, and which is still out there today. It began on a Gopher server, so it's pre-HTTP. I see a few smiles, a few nodding heads. Yeah, I kind of got my start on one of those as well. So it was very, very interesting. If you move forward, Virginia Tech is well known for creating the policy in 1997 of electronic theses and dissertations only to be submitted. But that also meant for us that we had to think about open access to these things because they went into our ETD database, which was the database was programmed and created at Virginia Tech, and that's how people across the world got to these theses and dissertations. So we had to think a lot about not just the process, but then, okay, now we have these open things. What do we do with this? How do we manage them? How do we make sure that they remain current for people? Next is the Open Scholarship Repository we call vTechWorks. We had ETDs for such a long time. I think we focused a lot on that we didn't have an institutional repository for a while. That was my first year, 2011. So we got a DSpace site up, and today it's, wow, there's over 100,000 items in it. There's about 2.5 million page views per year. So it's downloads and usage from every continent except Antarctica. I keep trying to pitch we need a research center in Antarctica, and then we can get a download from there. We also have a separate open research data repository. So we think of that as we are publishing data sets. That's gone really very well. We have over 600 data sets now at this point, and we use the Figshare platform for that. So that gets us to kind of the press and the publishing service and what were we doing. And I think with my own interest and background, I was very interested in seeing kind of this publishing service and press eventually get founded at Virginia Tech, was really looking out for that opportunity that might come along. So it was about 2017 when we had the opportunity to really do kind of an assessment on campus, and that's because we had Peter Potter available to us, who was our first director for our VT publishing service, who snuck in the back of the room. He's sitting here. So he can tell you all about it, but he spent a lot of time with faculty talking about their experiences with publishing and what they were looking for and what might we do for them. And I think in a nutshell, what came out of that was there was a lot of interest in receiving help and support dealing with the publishers out there, particularly author agreements and the terms that we come up with or they come up with in that regard. and an interest in curiosity about open access, wanting to publish through us. And so we began the next year, 2017 to 18, we founded Virginia Tech Publishing, and we've been going since then. This last year, with the support of the provost, we went with, we expanded to call it a press, Virginia Tech Publishing and Press, and what that really indicates is the peer-reviewed work that we do. At this point, it's the peer-reviewed books, might be some other kinds of digital scholarship, perhaps might be under the press name, but it is at this point peer-reviewed books. As a publishing service, we've always done peer-reviewed work, but we've done other things too that were, especially student publications that were not peer-reviewed. All right, with that, I'm going to give it to Corinne. This is her job. She directs all this, so we'll let her talk about publishing and press.
Okay, so thank you for that. That's helpful. So we are a fully open access program within the library. That means we're 100% funded. We need funding. I talked to Patrick and Tyler. However, we do have about some extra funding from grants and other materials. As Tyler noted, we launched in 2017, but we've really expanded this past year with joining Association of University Presses as an affiliate member in May. On average, we publish in the past about 5 books, 4 open educational resources, and maybe 1 digital scholarship project a year, while supporting about 14 open access journals. I'm going to add that has grown a bit. This past year, we did publish 7 books, so a special growth in monograph publishing here and book publishing. This coming year, we are looking at, I think I looked at it recently, about 9 books, 4 open educational resources again, and 6 digital scholarship projects. So we're also really growing in that digital scholarship multimodal area, which is my background, so I'm excited for that. We are still supporting those 14 open access journals, and we've supported about 20 other digital scholarship or multimedia projects over the past 8 years now as well. So that comes from this kind of publishing services realm, and our department also oversees a space in the library for digital humanities that has a classroom, a conference room, and a recording studio, so that kind of is partially why we do so much media work as well. We do have an annual budget for publications, about $70,000, give or take. Since there's some other aspects of our area, that was an interesting number to figure out. But we've been involved in several other grants and other funding opportunities. One that's really been helpful the past couple of years has been Virginia Tech has a campus EXP program that does wage matching for student internships on campus. So we've been able to grow our internship program significantly the past couple of years. That's been a huge benefit for us. So we're a press and a publishing program within a library. What does that mean? So we are really embedded in the library. We work really closely with our library colleagues and other departments. I report to Patrick Tomlin, our Associate Dean for Academic and Creative Engagement, so we're working closely within that unit as well as other units within the library. We do have 2 joint positions with data services. So one is a metadata services position that was built to support complex digital scholarship projects, but this person has also really taken on support for other areas of metadata and cataloging across the publishing and press program, which has been hugely beneficial. We also have another position that is with data education. Again, this was kind of designed primarily to support digital scholarship and digital humanities, but with that work, he's done a ton of support and outreach for the press as we've grown the past couple of years. And he's also beneficial with some of his programming skills to do more multimodal publications. We have one more position that's actually a joint position with the College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences, but we'll focus on the library for right now. We do also provide other resources and support for publishing efforts on campus, so we're really grown out of all of this history that Tyler just talked about. And we're continuing to do that in some respects. So we also offer workshops, consultations on open access, copyrights, digital scholarship, publishing proposals, all sorts of things. And we also provide tools. So we offer an instance of Overleaf that Peter started many years ago. And then we also have Reclaim Hosting Domain of One's Own that offers web hosting space for faculty, staff, and students on campus. So what's the author response been? So there's been a stronger interest from authors on campus and outside of campus since we kind of started announcing the press piece and joining AU Presses. However, there's also just been a general interest over the years as open access has grown, more and more folks have come our way, and I think that's going to continue to happen, especially since we are Diamond Open Access and have no fees. So we also have a continued interest from past authors, which I like to note because that means that they liked working with us. So they want to come back. So we have several past authors. One, we're about to publish a book next month, fingers crossed, with somebody, this will be his third book with us, Tom Ewing in our history department on campus. With some of the shifts the past couple of years, I also want to note that the authors that have worked with us in the past are really excited to continue working with us, and they're okay with the shifts and changes in some of our editorial processes. And then there's a specific interest in some of the multimodal and digital scholarship publishing. So we had one project it launched in 2021, the American Soldier in World War II. This was a large NEH-funded project where there's probably a dozen people or so in the library who were involved in this project in some level. But what we did, one aspect, we supported the project in many ways, but one aspect was in copy editing and peer review. And that professor was able to he was one of the first professors on campus, the first in his department that was able to get tenure and promotion based on this project alone. So that was a huge step for digital scholarship on campus. So challenges and opportunities, these are hand in hand. So we have space to work with more experimental publications since we're funded by the library, like digital scholarship, like open educational resources, other multimodal forms of scholarship. But these projects can also be a bit more of a challenge in and of themselves. Technology can change, technology can take more time. We're talking about multimedia pieces that take significantly more editing, all of that. What does peer review look like for these types of materials? How do we make sure the full project is peer reviewed and not just the content, especially if we're working with multimedia content? And then there's also this is a fairly new funding model, right? So how do we continue to grow with possibly limited funds, or how do we look for additional funds and make that case either to funding agencies or to campus? And then there's also opportunities to collaborate with other library colleagues in other areas, particularly in data services, preservation, strategic communications, all those areas. But that can also be a challenge in terms of making sure that our work is aligning with theirs and we're not just dumping our work on top of them, but working closely together and fostering kind of collaborative relationships there. So future growth in the coming years, I know we're hoping to continue increasing that number of publication as we kind of look to figure out what our capacity is and what our budget is. We're also expanding to authors outside of Virginia Tech. So previously, all of our authors have been affiliated with Virginia Tech in some ways. We do have 2 projects right now that are authors outside of Virginia Tech. One was a case of a professor who was at Virginia Tech and then left, but another one came to us completely from actually one of our special collections librarians. She referred them to us. We are expanding to solo authored monographs. So we have one that's going into production right now, and this will be our first solo authored monograph. We have had solo authored open educational resources and digital scholarship projects, but this will be a step in terms of that traditional book format. Most of our books, we've done 35 books over the past 8 years. Most of them have been edited volumes. There's other areas for future growth, so we're definitely looking at acquisition strategies. We're looking at marketing, data analytics, all of those pieces. Probably way too much to even list on this slide, but those are all in the works as well as we continue to consider what's possible in this space. And I think with that, I'll hand it back over to David.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, and we'll be happy to take questions. Yes, sir.